So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's call. I was watching this morning, as I often do, it's my Tuesday morning routine, watching Mike DiMuccio's Monday night call on the Aligning with Success. And he gave a great presentation, as did Madeline and as did Sophia. But Mike talked about the terror barrier. We've heard about this, and it struck a chord with me because I'd actually done a presentation earlier in the day for some of my group out in Mexico, where we talked about the barrier to our achievement being our fears. That often we know what's right, but we fail to do it because of fear, and fear gets in the way. It prevents us from getting the job done. And Mike just had this incredible presentation, and it just, like I said, it struck a chord. So we're going to collaborate a little bit today. I've asked him to share with us what they talked about last night. For those of you that were on the call last night, that are watching, it's worth a rewatch, isn't it? Because it's one of those things where, you need to take notes, you need to write it down, you need to pay close attention, you need to listen again. It just is so critical. So I'm going to ask Mike to take over, pass the time over to him. Mike, thank you so much for being with us and doing this a second time. I know you did it last night.
No, not a problem. This is a really important subject.
But it really is. It really is. Because like I said, I was speaking with a great group yesterday in Mexico, and they were talking about how to build teams. And we were talking about some of the critical daily activities that we need to do to build our teams well. And I said, you know what? I looked at the people in the group and I was like, I'm teaching you guys to suck lemons here. You guys know all this stuff. You're a great team. You're doing all this. The critical question is not what to do, but why don't we do it more? Why don't we do it more? And what's the obstacle? And the obstacle that we came back to was fear. Sometimes doing what is right is not what is easy. And in order to get the best results, in order to become the best version of ourselves, we have to lean into that uncomfortable space outside of our comfort zone and get uncomfortable and do the right thing, but it doesn't feel pleasant to us. So that being said, Mike, I'll pass the time over to you. I've made you a co-host, so
thank you.
You can share screen and jump on in.
Okay, I'll have to pull up that PowerPoint, so I'll defer back to you when I do that. But you just brought up something that I remember watching not maybe a week or so ago. Robert Kiyosaki, he was on a short video teaching a millennial and saying very common mistake that millennials are making right now is that they're pursuing their passion, which leads them over to the left-hand side of the cash flow quadrants, either as the employee working for somebody in a particular vocation or self-employed or specialist as a small business owner. And so they equate pursuing their passion, not for a minute realizing that doesn't necessarily lead to the financial resolve that they want in terms of the way they want to live. And he says, I had to learn to do a bunch of stuff that I didn't like doing because I wanted to live on the right-hand side. I knew that was my purpose. My purpose was to create wealth. And now with all that wealth, I invest in my passion. And so that's an interesting way of looking at it. He says, you have the advantage of time, but you also have the disadvantage of time, because what do you think? I'm young. I have what? Time. And the problem is they misuse that time. They don't invest that time properly to switch from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of those cash flow quadrants. And it's the same for those of us who've encountered this opportunity of NECAN. It's the opportunity to really live freedom. And yet there's nothing really in our experience up to now, life experience, that really has prepared us for freedom. We talk about it like it's our right, and we fight for it. But I don't know how many people, statistically speaking, actually live according to those ideals. Most people make all their life decisions based on how much money they have, what's in the bank account. Virtually every decision, from what I'm going to eat for dinner, to what kind of car I'm going to drive, to what clothes I'm going to buy, to what clothes I'm going to even look at buying, what stores I'm going to shop in before they even shop. All those decisions are predetermined by money. And so it's like a gatekeeper. And And that's the paradigm that we're living in. We live in a certain pretext, and then we only are able to see through the lens of that pretext possibilities for ourselves, even though there's so much more, so much beyond that pretext. And those conditions that we've been raised in, those conditions that we've adopted through a personal experience, through all the, all the upbringing. We're born in the matrix, I say. We're born into the matrix, depending on what culture you're from, what country you're born in, what language you speak, what color your skin is, what education you've had. All of these factors create a matrix, a paradigm, a condition that you accept and adopt as the norm for you. You accept that there's other norms for other people, but you internally are wired to accept the norm that you've come to know and identify with. And then on top of that, as we age, we pour on more identities. We start labeling ourselves and pack on some more of this weight of this identity. My car, my this, all these things to give ourselves a sense of identity, a sense of belonging. And yet all of this is made up. It's all as arbitrary as the direction of the wind. We can choose otherwise. We can change at any moment in time. It's very difficult, though, under the weight and the inertia of the identity we've created for ourselves, this thing called the paradigm. Now, it'll take me a second to bring up my PowerPoint, but maybe you can talk about that for a second, Ben, as I do that.
Yeah, absolutely. In this context of identity, a really fascinating concept here, because the word identity comes from this concept of we are what we repeatedly do. Yeah, we are what we repeatedly do. So often when we look at our habits, we will start to form our own sense of personal identity based on what we personally do. And that means not just what we publicly do, but also what we privately do. Now, my son taught me a really valuable lesson the other day when he gave a great definition of moral virtue. He said, those that possess moral virtue course correct quickly. I really liked that, because what he said, there were two lessons there. Those that are in possession of moral virtue, he said, he identified in that definition, aren't perfect because they course correct quickly, meaning they acknowledge if they've dropped the ball, they are quick to make a change. They don't define themselves by the dropped ball. They pick the ball back up, they course correct and move forwards in the right direction again. And they do it fast. I really like that. There are many instances where in our journey to success, in our desire to become the best version of ourselves, we will drop the ball. Yeah. And in the process of doing that, we define ourselves by the ball on the ground versus by the ball in our hands. And as a result, we freeze. We don't move forwards. So I think it's really important as we look at how we define ourselves to recognize that every human being on the planet is flawed. Yeah. And as a part of that process of becoming, it is our task in building the best identity for ourselves to course correct quickly. And I just love the encouragement that that definition gave, because it means in the pursuit of the best identity that I want to have. And Sophia referenced this, last night when she talked about the importance of daily habits. Yeah. In establishing the daily habits that we have, that will take time and practice in order to master. And on occasion, we won't get it right. We might miss a day. We might do it badly. And we start again the next day. We pick up where we left off. We do it again. We do it again. We do it again. And in the process of that, we can move into that space where we become the best version of ourselves. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. But is it rewarding? 100%. So with that being said, it looks like Mike's got his presentation good to go. So back to you, Mike.
So let me define this thing called the terror barrier, because invariably you must encounter it if you challenge yourself or your identity, or anyone, in fact, challenges your identity. The moment that happens, you're into a wall, essentially, from the known to the unknown. The defining wall, the barrier between the knowing of self, your known self, the version of yourself that you identify with, and that unknown. Let me give an example. Let's say you're really good at something and you know it so well that you're very comfortable doing it, but then someone's tasked you with the responsibility of, well, let's say Nikan, for instance. I heard somebody was talking about, I think it was Madeline last night, getting comfortable with the idea of a green screen, and then she has to project that image, and all of a sudden she's in the unknown, she's in the uncomfortable zone. So there's what happens when, and that's not an extreme example, but it's still an example. When we move into the unknown, what it causes is anxiety within us. That anxiety comes from the conflict between our self-image, what we know ourselves to be good at, comfortable with, familiar with, and what we know ourselves to be unfamiliar with, maybe uncomfortable with. The second we're confronted with that reality, that wall, we have one of two choices. We either veer away from the wall, we move away from it, or we break through it. That's the only two choices there are. And if we don't do it consciously, what will happen is it's done for us subconsciously. We will veer away from the wall. It's the fight or flight response. So think of the person that you're seeing near the stick, the famous Bob Proctor stick person, where the big circle is your mind, and the small circle represents physical, your body and the physical world we're living in. So the mind is divided into two categories: the conscious mind, where we think our thoughts. This is where you're consciously aware of having thoughts. As a child, you do not have that awareness until you're 2, 3, 4 years of age. It's usually around the 3 years of age, the terrible twos, et cetera, where you're starting to meet yourself and starting to self-identify and starting to have the faculty of being able to choose and selectively choose what you agree with or don't agree with. Most parents have gone through this. But prior to that, think of all the programming that's gone straight into the subconscious mind, the emotional mind, where we hold all our feelings. So we are very, very subjective early in life. We absorb everything as though it's a fact, and we don't know to reject it because we don't know any better, and we don't have the capability of knowing any better until later on. So how many things have we absorbed into the subconscious mind even before we are aware of ourselves that we hold in that subconscious mind as fact, that we're not even conscious of, we're not even aware of? Maybe if you went into a psychiatric office and they were able to do some deep regression therapy on you, they might be able to conjure up some feelings. Like, for instance, maybe you're in the back seat of the car and your parents are arguing about money. And you learn about money as an infant before you even know what money is, but you know how it feels. It doesn't feel good. And so that leaves a lasting mark on your consciousness. So now, if we look at the body, ideally what happens is the power that flows to and through us, this infinite power of creator and creation, flows to and through us and gives us, within the context of this power, the ability to imagine something. You have a faculty in you, a higher faculty in you, that an animal does not have, that a plant does not have. The only thing that makes you as a creative being, as one of the greatest creations of all of the universe, is the ability to imagine a version of yourself or a version of something in your imagination that doesn't even exist in front of you, but you can imagine. You can all imagine a pink elephant right now as I say those words, even though you've never seen it. So you have this co-creative ability, born in the likeness and image of the creator, to imagine something. And then you can impress that imagination or that image into your subconscious mind by feeling. What does it feel like to be in the presence of that pink elephant? And so forth. So we create an impression, a feeling. And if we do that often enough, what happens is we start to act like we're in the presence of that elephant. In fact, top athletes do this all the time. And they're able to, and they have demonstrated this, the physiological responses in the body are as if that person's actually experiencing that marathon that they're imagining in their mind. So this is the way it works. And of course, how we impress on the world creates the results. And some of these things go beyond just the physical actions. We've seen from Dr. Emoto's work that what you think about, what you emote, can actually create an impression on water, even though you're not touching the water. And that water can then be analyzed, and you can see a change in the water and the physical properties of that water, the characteristics of that water, just through an intention that you set out by your mind. The power of your mind when it's really working in harmony with your thoughts and your feelings. So this is the way it works. This is how everything happens in our life. Now, let's say you've got an idea, like a goal. You've got a really important goal that you've set for yourself this month, this year, this quarter, whatever. It could be a Nikken goal, could be a great goal like Royal Diamond. Hey, I always say start with the end in mind. There's nothing, everything else in between is just a stopping point along the way. So let's say you've got this great idea. It's a great idea. It's a very positive idea. And you start to imagine yourself as a Royal Diamond. I don't even know you're going to get that far before you're going to meet with the challenge, the terror barrier. Suddenly you're imagining a possibility for yourself that is not the self you know yourself to be. That's that self-image that you have of yourself before you imagined. So this why, we call it the why. This why is this new image that you have for yourself, this new possibility. And the second you start to imagine that possibility in your life, think about a new person joining the business. They're in the process of evaluating whether Nikken can provide for them what they're looking for, but they've not experienced what they're looking for necessarily. They're only imagining it. And so expect they're going to hit the terror barrier. They're going to have to confront the reality that through their entire life, through their senses, they have observed themselves to be and have adopted themselves to believe to be true things about themselves, which are their identity. Those negative ideas mixed with some positive, but how many of us have super positive ideas about ourselves? In the relative mix, most of us are living up to our potential as we see our potential, not as it is. It's our image of self. It's the X factor. And that X factor has a huge impact on the results we're experiencing, regardless of what you impress in your imagination. And so they tell us that there's only two ways to get that why to burst out into the reality of our life. Only two ways: shock, which causes the X to be changed, shock factor. So somebody has a near-death experience or experiences tragedy in their life or something of that sort, that causes a shift. Or maybe the positive, falling in love. That creates a paradigm shift. That X starts to be modulated and can look more like the Y. But shock is not something we can predict or count on, especially if we're trying to create our life with purpose, on purpose, setting goals for ourselves. So what we're challenged with is this X factor that we can't even put our finger on. We don't even know what aspect of it is that's affecting us. We set a simple goal, maybe to hit Club Ki, and for whatever reason, we're not picking up the phone and making the phone calls. It's like, how do we get from here to there? Something is blocking us. It's that terror barrier. It's that wall. It's like, if you're a golfer, if you're an excellent golfer, or even just an average golfer, whatever your game is, let's say it's a 90. That's a mediocre, but a good game for a person who enjoys golf. Let's say you go on the front nine and you shoot a 40 on the front nine. My God, a 40, you normally shoot a 45. This game is looking pretty good. You might crack 80 this round. 10-1 on the back nine. Guess what you're going to shoot? Probably closer to a 50, because your self-image tells you you're a 90 golfer. If you've done that for many years, that's the program, that's the paradigm. And so you will inadvertently, subconsciously start sabotaging your success in the back nine. Happens all the time. So how do we overcome the inertia of this? This is the big challenge. How do I deal with what I don't even know what I'm dealing with? It's happening on a subconscious level. I have a great idea, this why idea, and I want to overcome the X factor that's blocking me from achieving the results that I want. I'm sending into the universe a very mixed message. Y is what I want, X is what I'm acting like. And that double binding message creates confusion, and the results mirror that. So what I've learned, what the great texts have taught, this came to me in a flash, that how has it worked for me? Because I applied this when I was going for Royal Diamond, and I wrote a goal card. I still have my goal card. And I wrote something on the back of the goal card because it was that one thing that I stuck to, and the one thing that I really wanted to believe to be true, and the one thing I wanted to put to the test if it was true. And that was the message: if you have but the faith of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move, and it will move. Ultimately, the test of whether I can create a Y, regardless of whatever X is going on in my life, was whether I was able to hold true to faith. And I realized that faith wasn't faith in an invisible God moving mountains for me. It was my adherence to the image of Y, and then the natural law of God then moves that thing into form just by the process you see on the screen. If I can impress into my physicality, into my mental and emotional state, an alignment with that Y idea, then it must be expressed into form. That's the nature of reality. That's God's modus operandi. And so faith became the functional piece of this. This is the thing that allows me and everyone to shunt the X factor. I don't have to go to a psychiatrist and learn about what's wrong with me. That's going to be a long process and very useless, since it's only going to focus me on what's wrong with me. What I want to know is, what do I want to create? And what do I need to adhere to in order to create it, irrespective of my shortcomings? And that is faith. So let me define that a little bit more clearly, what I mean by faith. And Ben, you can certainly speak to this. You're one of the people I rely on for this information. So faith, as I pointed out last night, is the ability to see something, see an outcome, even though you don't know how to get there. Faith is the ability to trust that the steps will reveal themselves, even though you don't know what the steps are. That's faith. Faith is that thing, that bridge that you can walk on, knowing that as long as you keep taking steps, there's going to be somewhere for your foot to land on. It's just knowing and trusting in the inevitable, that as you keep moving toward your vision, it will manifest. It's just that knowing, that trusting, the reliance on that, and shunting the idea that you need to even know how it works. You don't need to know how it works. That's God's domain. How he makes the invisible visible, that's not in our domain as human beings. And so it allows me to be relieved of having to figure everything out. It allows me to be relieved of having to be certain that that I have to know how something's going to happen for it to happen. No, in fact, you won't even know how it's going to happen until it's happened. Only in hindsight will be able to point to it and say, oh, that's how it happened. So it relieves me of all the stress and the frustration and the anxiety when I hit that terror barrier that says, I'm in the unknown. Good. Now we got some possibilities here. Now we got some growth potential here. Because if I was in the known, I'm just repeating yesterday. That's boring. I want to move on in life. I want to create. Creating means I'm forcing myself into the unknown, and I'm comfortable there because you know what I know? As long as I keep taking those steps forward, there's always going to be a place for my foot to land. That's faith. And that's the thing that I discovered that changed everything for me. When your thoughts and your feelings and actions are consistent with the vision that you hold in your mind's eye, and you go about this with faith, meaning an attitude of gratitude. I'm grateful for having achieved whatsoever ye ask for and ye pray for, ask as though ye have achieved it and ye shall receive it. Well, what does that mean? I walk forward as if the why is already who I am. I take steps as though the why is who I am. And if I want to be clear about that, get around some people who are living the why life and get familiar with how they think, how they feel, how they act. And that familiarity will become more and more familiar to you every day, because those are the steps you're taking every day. You're completely dismissing the old you as if the old you has died, the death and the resurrection. The old you dies to give birth to the new you. And that's it. And when you start to hear the old you show up, because it does, those monkeys that are in the subconscious mind, they like to rear their heads the second you press up against that terror barrier. Hear the voice in your head. Recognize the voice in your head as the monkey. It is the old you. And reject it. You're a conscious being that has the ability to choose what to accept and what to reject as an idea. You can even eject the feeling of uncomfortableness. You can reject the butterflies in your stomach. You know what? If I got butterflies in my stomach, that's probably a good sign, because it's telling me I'm stepping into the unknown. And lastly, when you get those clear intentions, when you align this, then what you are signaling to the universe has no opposition, none. It must manifest into form. And so our job on a daily basis is to consistently apply this attitude of gratitude by being conscious of our thoughts, feelings, and actions, that they are those of the why person. And when you hear the next person, the X person show up, because you're pressing up against that wall, just recognize that voice is the voice of the past. Let it go. Dismiss it.
Mike, that is absolutely, we could just go on. I've got so many different thoughts and feelings and ideas going around in my mind right now about what you have shared. That is just powerful, powerful. I want to conclude, first of all, by saying a big thank you. I love this principle of faith in who we can become. This principle of faith is just so critical for all of us. To me, faith is a principle of action, and it is a principle of power. And it contains, it's more than belief, it's more than trust, it's more than confidence. It encapsulates all of that, but it's more. It's more than. And yes, it includes knowledge, but it's faith. So as Mike said, it doesn't have all knowledge. So it doesn't know what the next step might be sometimes, but that's what makes it faith. But it still makes it a principle of action and power. So it's critical that we understand that as we move forwards with our business, that we won't always have all answers in front of us, but we can have great power in what we do if we do it with faith. I want to conclude with a thought from an Olympic athlete. He was a gymnast who won a gold medal back in 1984 in the Olympics, a man by the name of Peter Vidmar. And I want to just share something that he said here about what makes a great athlete. And I want to apply this to what Mike has been talking about here, about what makes us great in what we're doing. I'm going to read it out. He said, what makes a great athlete? I remember a great Olympic champion who was once addressed this question. He named some important factors such as coaching, great coaching, good equipment, good athletes to train with, or just pure natural talent. He said, all of these ingredients can go into the recipe for a great athlete, and each will help him in his own way. But there is one quality that rises above it all, and without it, the athlete is not complete. That ingredient is desire. And for me, that is also a central ingredient of faith, isn't it? That we desire to become the person that we wish to become, that we can see with our mind's eye, engage our imagination and see with our mind's eye the person we wish to be, but we also desire it with every feeling of our heart, because it's that desire that will facilitate the action. He said, the athlete with the greatest desire to succeed will stand a greater chance of reaching his or her goal. The same holds true for the student or the musician or whatever it is that you aspire to be. A 5-year study of many of the United States' top athletes, musicians, and scholars recently concluded that drive and determination, not great natural talent, led to their extraordinary success. Drive and determination led to the success. And then he went on to say, now, as you look at the other great athletes, he'd go on to these events and he'd compete, and he'd come back and he'd say to his family, they'd always ask him, did you work harder than everyone else? And he'd always answer, yes, I worked harder than everyone else. He said, but to work harder didn't mean I had to work twice as hard. If someone was working 6 hours a day in their training, I didn't have to train for 12. He said, I did have to do maybe at least 6 hours, 15 minutes. He says, because when you look at the results in the Olympics, it's by, if there's a cycling competition, a cycling race, it's by half a tire that the winner wins the race. If it's a swimming race, it's by 0.024 of a second that the winner wins the race. If it's a running race, or if it's a gymnastics event, it's by 0.25 of a point that the person wins. He said, it's not that you have to do twice as much, you just have to do a little bit better. My invitation, my invitation to everyone today is to make that commitment to do a little better with our faith, to dig in a little bit more to ourselves, to trust ourselves more, to believe ourselves more, to connect to that vision, that imagination that we have, and dream a little bit better, and then work towards it a little bit more. We don't have to do twice as much to be the victor. We just have to do a little better than what we're doing now. Yeah, and that can make all the difference. But a lot of the time, that really comes back to us. That faith has to be in that greater power, but it also has to be intrinsically linked to us. Intrinsically linked. The relationship with us and that power we have to understand is a strong one. And when we can have confidence in that, we can then go out and do great things. We've got to have that faith in us, meaning my strength and the strength of the greater power, and that we can work together to do great things. So I hope this has been a great help. Thank you, Mike, for an incredible presentation, for what you shared today. Great value, great principles to apply in our business. Really, really good. At the end of the day, there are lots of skills to apply in order to be great ambassadors for NECAN and to do great work with NECAN. But the foundation is on great principles. These skills will be learned when we have a love for what we do, a commitment to the cause that we're engaged in, and a great confidence and a great faith for what we're about to bring to pass. With that faith comes action, and with that action comes power, and with that power comes results. So I hope you feel your faith strengthened today. And as I've always said, when that faith in us we feel is a little bit doubtful, when we're struggling a little bit because we've been knocked down, please rely on the faith of those around you, that we have faith in you. One of the great roles and responsibilities of your leaders, with Mike and I here today, is that we have faith in you. We're here because we believe that you can do great things. So if you're doubting, if you're struggling, have confidence that we believe in you. And with that confidence, take the next step until we get stronger together. Thank you very much. Love you loads. Thanks again, Mike. And we'll see you all next week. Take care.